A great property manager is really difficult to find, and also one of the most important parts of your team of advisors. So in today's video, I'm going to talk about how to find a great property manager for your investment property, regardless of which suburb or state that you live in Australia. So welcome, my name's Ben Everingham. I'm the director here at Pumped On Property. Please subscribe to our channel if you haven't already done so. So let's talk about the things that I look for. Now, this is based on my experiences personally. Having bought 11 properties, I've obviously had a bunch of different managers from Sydney, the Central Coast, Brisbane, North Brisbane, and the Sunshine Coast, and all of those managers have taught me, sometimes the easy way, sometimes the very hard way, that there is a consistency between people that do the right thing for your property and ultimately treat the property like it's their own, which is the number one thing that I want from a property manager. I want to know that they have my back, that my property is going to be kept at the highest possible standard with the highest quality tenants and consistent rental income with the lowest possible vacancy rate year round. So the first thing I look at when trying to find or recruit a great property manager for my investment is experience. Experience is absolutely vital in the property management space, and I want the specific manager who's going to be looking after my property to have at least 3 to 5 years experience in the industry. It's not good enough for me to get someone who's fresh on the job, because I've also owned a property management business myself. I know how long it takes people in that space to cut their teeth, to really know their stuff, and to have a process in place which means they can consistently deliver above average results for your property. So experience is absolutely necessary. And the second thing I'm always looking at is, do they have the accreditations or the licenses to actually do the job properly? Now, in every single state in Australia, there is a real estate institute, and they provide formal licensing qualifications for people to work as a property manager, as well as the owner of the business to run the license to run a property management business. Now, I want to make sure that the people that I'm working with are licensed professionals, so that one, I've got a surety that they're being trained properly, and two, each year they've obviously got professional development which continues to keep them in the loop. Now, I think the third thing that I think is super important and completely overlooked when talking about finding and selecting the right property manager is the number of properties per manager in the office. I've heard some firms or some of the big property companies you see around Australia, like your LJ Hookers, your Hardcourts, your Ray Whites, for example, having one manager sometimes looking after up to 500 properties. Now, that is just absolutely insane. It means that your property will be a low priority and never looked after, because all they have time to do is absolutely put out fires with all of the tenants and owners that they're trying to look after. A great number of properties for a property manager to look after is probably somewhere between 70 and, depending on the experience of the manager, maybe 100, maybe slightly more than that. But if the manager that's looking after your property is looking after any more than that, it is just overwhelming for them to be able to do their job properly. And when you start to think about their job, you know, every one of those 100 properties that they look after per year needs 4 routine inspections. There's also 4 sets of water bills, electricity bills that need to be covered. There's 100 tenants and 100 different properties that require maintenance. There's 100, transactions that need to be paid out to you every single month. There's just so much going on, and it can really take away from quality management. So, key question, how many properties does my specific manager look after? And also, how many properties does your company look after at the moment? How long have you been in business, and how many staff work there, and what are the different roles of those staff? Now, this might sound a bit like overkill, but trust me, as someone who's had tenants burn down my granny flats, break into my houses, who's had flood damage, who's had water damage, who's had fire damage, it is absolutely necessary to have a great property manager that is going to have your back when you really need it. Not when everything's going okay, but he's going to keep your property in tip-top order from a maintenance perspective as well. Now, a very important thing when selecting the right manager is, what process do they follow? Because management is such a 1 or a 0 type thing. It's like the property's in good enough condition or it's not. It's basically that black or white. It's a good tenant or it's not. They're paying their bills or they aren't. it is very, very important to work with a management company and a manager that is very, very detailed, very, very process orientated, so that key things around your property aren't slipping. Now, price is always important as well, and like everything in life, you pay for what you get. There's plenty of managers out there that are chasing any business they can possibly get, or companies out there chasing any business they can get for the lowest price. And I've heard of managers in Brisbane, in Melbourne, in Sydney charging as low as 4% for their management. But the average in those areas varies depending on the state. You know, Brisbane, the average is around about 8%. Sydney's probably somewhere between 6 and 7, as is Melbourne. So don't go for the cheapest person just because they're the cheapest. They're cheap for a reason, and that's because they either don't know what they're doing, they don't have the experience, or they're cutting corners somewhere in their business. And you certainly don't want a manager to cut corners for an extra couple of percent. Now, let's get real about this for a moment. 1% on a $400,000 property, or a $400 a week rent return, is literally $4 a week. So if you're splitting hairs about 1% from going from a great manager to a shitty one, you're talking about $400 a week. You know, if you're renting your property for $1,000 a week, we're talking about $10 a week, man, to have peace of mind and to get the right results. So, you know, price is important. Obviously, as an investor, we want to consistently bring down the price of the services or the products associated with looking after our property and bring up the quality of our team. But don't be a cheapskate and, you know, miss the stuff that's really, really important. Now, maintenance is an issue with every single property that you will ever own. As soon as the property is more than about 3 years old, there's going to be stuff that comes up. I like a management company that's proactive on maintenance. So each quarter that they have a look at the property for me, they identify any issues, and then they prioritize those issues based on severe to, you know, don't worry about it type stuff, so that I can consistently do little things to my property to keep it in the best shape, rather than having, oh my God moment like I've had on one of my properties where I was getting really poor reports and not really looking at them at that time in my life when I was 24, 25. After 3 or 4 years of that, I've gone to look at the property, and the condition of the property has gone down so rapidly that I actually had to renovate almost half the property just to get it back up to scratch. So it's much easier to pay $500 a couple of times a year to maintain everything than it is to pay $20,000 once every 10 years to just sort of fix it all at once. And it's a lot more painful that way, I'll tell you that. So you want a proactive manager that can not just identify maintenance issues for you, but address them as they come up. So ask the property manager, what's their policy around maintenance? Can they organize a quote or a number of quotes to get works fixed in a meaningful period of time without disturbing your rental stream as well? Now, another thing that a lot of people, myself included, when I was first starting out, didn't realize is that some managers and some management companies will actually pay your bills for you. So you can get your insurance sent to them, you can get your rates, your water, your electricity, you know, your third party insurances as well, and that sort of stuff there, or your landlord's insurances there. So I like that. Like, it's kind of like if you've got a great manager in place with a good process, you can outsource all of those things, and then they all come up on your rental statement once a year. So at tax time, it's a lot easier to consolidate what's going on with that actual investment property as well. So that's something that I do now. I just completely outsource everything but insurance, because the insurance companies are super sneaky, and every single year they will increase your policy without really telling you about it. So I like to call them up and just keep them accountable and make sure each year I'm getting a discount, not an increase in my rates. But with everything else, I trust that my property manager is going to have that covered. And it's nice when they're doing things like your electricity, which is a tenant expense, or your water, which if your property is water compliant, you know, you pay the admin fee, the tenant pays the usage fee. So getting that stuff outsourced to your manager is just one less thing that you have to think about. And trust me, as someone who's bought a few properties, as time goes on, the less you have to think about those properties, the better. The last major tip, I suppose, in terms of how to find a great property manager for you is, the number one thing I look for is a property manager that's proactive and ridiculously hard on issues that come up. So I don't want my property to be vacant for long periods of time. I don't want my property to have major maintenance issues that are pissing off the tenants, and so I lose a really good long-term tenant. I don't want a property where my tenant is constantly in arrears or behind on their rent. I want a proactive property manager that goes and checks out the place, sees that it's not in perfect condition, and provides a list to the person living in the property, the tenant, to rectify those issues. I want a manager who, if a tenant misses a payment of mine, breaches that tenant and is very, very hard on them so that they come back into line and they don't do it again. So I think these things are so important when we think about management, and I hope you've got some value out of today's video where we've talked about identifying the right manager and how important experience is, the number of properties, the process they follow, obviously price being important as well as how they address maintenance, how they react to issues that come up on the property and their approach to that, as well as, you know, that nice to have, which is getting them to pay your bills as well. So the quality of your investments and your future is 100% dependent on the quality of your team of advisors, and a great property manager for your investment property will take care of so many things. My property managers also organize renovations for me these days. Like, they go that far above and beyond just to look after me, because they know I will look after them and I'll be loyal to them if they do the same. So good luck with your investment, good luck with your property manager. I know it's not always easy, and sometimes you're going to find some shockers before you find that toad that becomes the prince, but the reality is, you know, that's the way that this world works, and we wish you all the best.